Well, hello and welcome back to Bible Study. So glad that you are back with us for another day as we continue on through our study of the topic of unity, utilizing the lens of the book of Ephesians. Today we find ourselves in chapter 4, verses 17 through 25. Now, I want to tell you that all of this is brought thanks to the generous donors at Christ Table. If you'd like to find out more about Christ Table, I'd encourage you to visit this website sometime, www.christtable.today. Sign up for our email list so that you'll be aware of everything that is going on there, and then consider donating. This is only possible each and every day because of our generous donors, and we're generous back to those people who regularly donate. If you donate for the first time, I'm going to send you a box in the mail that includes a Bible study and some other incredible content. And then regularly, each couple of months, we send a box of resources through the mail to help you grow and thrive spiritually. Would love to have you on board. Either way, I'm glad that you're here for the Bible study. If you would like to continue along with us on the Bible study, then I want to encourage you to go to go.christtable.today/unity. You're going to find a PDF that lists all of the readings for the rest of the Bible study. You don't have to start at the very beginning. Just start where you are with us and then continue over with us over the next few days and weeks. And we're glad that you will be there alongside us. One other way you can be alongside of us, if you are in the area of northeastern Ohio this weekend on Sunday at 11 o'clock, August 22nd. Myself and a handful of other people from Christ Table are going to be meeting together for some food, for some conversation, to get to know each other a little bit and talk. It will be an incredible time. Now, this isn't going to be one of our larger gatherings because I know COVID is going on, and as we've reached out to the community of people in northeastern Ohio who are part of this ministry, a lot of people just feel a little bit more comfortable staying home. But for those who are willing to come and be a part of what we're doing, we're going to be at Daniels Park. It's going to be outside. You can definitely social distance from other people. And we're going to provide food there for that at 11 o'clock on Sunday. You can find more information on our website about it at www.christtable.today. Well, why don't we just go ahead and dig in? As we have walked through the book of Ephesians, one of the things that we have found is that Paul has kind of been peeling the layers of the onion when it comes to unity. He started really just kind of globally speaking about what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus Christ and all of the things that Christ has done for us. And he's been getting closer and closer and closer to this idea of then how do we be people of unity, not just in our religious circles, but how do we be people of unity in our families? How do we be people of unity in our communities? How do we be people of unity in our marriages and in our families and in our most important relationships? And now he is really putting shoe leather to his ideas and is getting really practical about how we accomplish that. And so when we now jump into today's Bible study readings and chapter 4, verses 17 through 25, he's going to get kind of real specific, and he's also going to make us pause and think a little bit about who we are and where we are, and making sure that we are being unified with the right people and with the right things. So let's just jump right in here. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17, Paul writes, "With the Lord's authority, I say this." So he must have felt that maybe there would be a little bit of pushback from people. Paul, that's just you saying that. And so Paul writes, "No, with the Lord's authority, I say this, live no longer as the Gentiles do, for they're hopelessly confused." Paul's writing to a church that, for all intents and purposes, is kind of like an ancient Las Vegas. It's kind of like an ancient Dubai. It is a city that is at the crossroads of commerce, like in New York City or a London or a Dubai, but it's also at the crossroads of excess and entertainment, a resort community that many people came to in order to experience all of the pleasures, all of the sensualities of life. And so it was a cosmopolitan city like no other in the ancient world. And it is a Gentile, meaning not a Jewish city. So when Paul writes, live no longer as the Gentiles do, What he's saying here is, I want you to look around at the people in the community, the cosmopolitan community that you're living in, people who are chasing things other than Jesus, temporal pleasures, are chasing money, or chasing wealth, or chasing sex. Those things, as a follower of Christ, we should be looking at those things and saying those people are hopelessly confused about what they should be changing, about what they should be chasing. One of the things that I think is helpful sometimes in passages is to swap out words in order to help us understand it a little bit better. And so I think it would be very easy, because Americans are Gentiles, for us to simply swap out that word Gentiles with the word Americans here. With the Lord's authority, I say this: live no longer as the Americans do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from the life that God gives, because they've closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. That is a willful choice, to harden one's heart and to close one's mind against God. Why would somebody do that? Well, there are multiple reasons why somebody might close their mind or their heart to God. But whenever we close our mind and our heart to God, the Bible is quite clear. We're closing our mind and our heart to light. And as God is light, if we close ourselves off to that, then we become a person who lives in darkness. And Jesus said that people would rather live in darkness because their deeds are evil, because the things that they want to do are godless. They're hopelessly confused, and they wander far from the life that God gives because they've closed their minds and their hearts off to God. They have no sense of shame, verse 19. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. But this isn't what you learned about Christ. And so Paul is kind of setting up here an either or. I don't think Paul's point is to pick on people who don't know God. I don't think Paul's point is necessarily to set up this dichotomy between us and them. Jesus was very clear: be in the world, but not necessarily of the world. And this is kind of what Paul is encouraging here once again, is I know that you have to live in Ephesus. I know that you have to live in this world that is hopelessly confused as to what they should be doing and be chasing. But also you should understand that you need to be radically different than those Gentiles are living, or than those Americans are living. That's not what you learned about Christ. And so what we see happen, actually, when we look back at history, is the believers who were listening to Paul and who were following the way of Jesus in the 2nd century, which is very early in the church. It says these letters began to be disseminated among the Christians in Asia Minor and the area, is that Christians began to see themselves and speak of themselves as a third race. They no longer kind of considered themselves Jews, because Jews wanted to keep Judaism the way that it was and not see Jesus as being the Messiah and the fulfillment. And even though many of the people who were coming to followership in Jesus were Gentiles, they still did not any longer see themselves as being of the Gentile race. They were Gentiles, but they kind of saw themselves as this different thing, this third race thing. There can be negative in that, but I also think that there is positive in that it allows us to see ourselves as being strangers, outsiders in this world, having our citizenship in some other place and some other nation. And spiritually, whenever we follow Christ, that is precisely what happens. Verse 21, Paul says, "Since you have heard about Jesus and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life." Whenever Paul uses language like this here and in other places, what's in view, we've just experienced the Olympics worldwide. Finally, the 2020 Olympics finally happened. This is kind of the idea here that Paul has in mind: throwing off your old sinful nature, your former way of life, throwing off those things that weigh you down, that are unnecessary to this new event, this new life in which you're living. If you're a swimmer, you want the least amount of resistance and drag as possible. If you're a runner, you want shoes that are going to give you the best and greatest forward momentum. If you're in track and field, you don't want to be wearing things or carrying things around that are unnecessarily heavy. And so Paul says you need to throw off all of these old things and all of these former ways of life because they are no longer helpful to you and in your new mission. Those things, that life in which you lived before, verse 22, is corrupted. It's corrupted by lust. It's corrupted by deception. Paul's going to come back to this idea of deception in just a moment. But he says, instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and your attitudes. Jesus and the New Testament, the Bible itself, is always coming back to the power of the mind, the presence and the prevalence of the mind in determining who we are and how we think. We can go in many directions in our life, and many of those directions that we can go are ultimately highly destructive. But our minds can make us believe that that's the path that we should take. You see this happening a lot right now with conspiracy theories and pseudoscience and things that our mind, if follows, leads us astray. And we believe we're on the right path, but we're not. Jesus says, you know what? That's not the way of Jesus. You need a brain transplant. You're going to have to renew your thoughts and your attitudes. You're going to have to let go of that old way of thinking and that old life. It was absolutely and unequivocally confused. Christians have to think differently than those who do not follow Christ. Now, there's a bit of a danger here because many times the examples that we look to and see as being those people who are Christians may not be following the way of Christ. I see many Christians who follow politics. I see many Christians who follow power. I see many Christians who follow a lot of pastors. And many of those politicians and power brokers and pastors are not following Christ. But to other weaker Christians, it may seem as though that is the way of Christ, and it's not. We should look different than the world. And if the Christians who we're following look like the rest of the world, it's probably not the way of Jesus. Paul's saying here that Christians think differently than those who don't follow Christ. How do you know who follows Christ? Well, it's not because they say they follow Christ. I'll tell you the best way to know whether or not someone follows Jesus Christ. Do they live in the fruits of the Spirit? Galatians chapter 5, 22 and 23. I wish I had it here to put it up, but you can look it up, write it down, or come back and get it out of the video. Timestamp is 13 minutes and 38 seconds in. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23 talk about what happens whenever somebody follows the way of Jesus. They become people of love, joy, peace, long-suffering of others, patient, humble, good, not self-serving. And the whole list is there. It also gives a list right near there in Galatians chapter 5 of people who are not following the way of Jesus, the rotten fruit of a spirit that is not the Spirit of God. Just because somebody says they're a Christian doesn't mean they're on the way of Jesus. Don't follow those people. Follow the people who follow Christ. And the people who follow Christ are really easy to pick out. Using Galatians 5, 22 and 23, the fruit of the Spirit. Paul says that nature, those clothes, those are the things you need to put on. Verse 24, put on your new nature, created to be like God truly righteous and holy. Not just saying you're righteous, not just acting self-righteous, but truly righteous and holy. And then Paul's going to begin to cut to the chase. And we're going to pick up on the rest of what Paul says about how to make sure that you are being truly righteous and holy when we pick this back up next week in our study. But I'll give you a little beginning of that here in verse 25 as we close. Paul says, one of the ways in which we put on a new nature, in which we are like God, truly righteous and holy, is to stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. Lying and deception is of the world. It is not of God. What is a lie? Lie is something that is not truthful with the intent to deceive. Many of us have been lied to and believe lies. I just had an argument an argument is a strong word, but just had a conversation with someone a few minutes ago who in the midst of this pandemic is believing lies, naming the name of Christ, but believing lies. It's tough to see. It's tough to see someone who names the name of Christ follow lies and then tell lies. We must be people of truth if we are people of Christ. If we are not people of truth, we are not people of Christ. The Christian life must be radically different from the old life. If your life as a follower of Jesus Christ looks no different than the average Joe, looks no different than the life that you lived before you came to Jesus Christ, then it's not me challenging, it's the Bible challenging whether or not you're actually living the Christian life. Those are tough words to hear. Those are tough words to say. I would love to just sit here and say, live however the hell you want to live. Paul says no. Jesus says no. The Christian life must be radically different than the Gentile life, than the American life. Here's the question. Is the life that you're living radically different? Is the life that you're living radically different? Thanks for joining us here at Christ Table. Until next week, happy reading.